In order to understand what we're talking about and what the title tax, now many of you heard several years ago, this piece of legislation started about 4 years ago. It's had several different iterations and there have been several different versions of it. When it originally started, it was called a title fee. It was going to be a title fee. Early on, there was some conversation that they couldn't call it a fee because if they did, then schools could not accept that money because schools, by Constitution, receive their money either through an ad valorem tax or sales tax. They aren't allowed to accept fees. So when they decided to move forward with this legislation, they went through and changed it all the way through to a state and local title ad valorem tax. So for purposes you'll see all the way through this presentation, we lovingly call this TAVT for lack of anything else to name it with, so you don't have to say all of that every time. This piece of legislation also moved through the legislature as quickly as anything I've ever seen in the close to 30 years that I've been watching Georgia legislature. We looked at it on a Monday afternoon, I believe. It went to the committee on Tuesday morning. It came out of committee, went to the House, went to the Senate, and was signed all within about 5 days. It wasn't signed within 5 days, but it had the approval of both the House and the Senate within a few days. Having said that, there's a whole lot of stuff in here that a lot of folks are unclear about. And part of what we're vested with as the folks who are going to be meeting those taxpayers face to face is helping them understand and educating them on what this really means. Most of you have heard someone say the birthday tax has gone away. That's not right. That's wrong. Unless I buy a new vehicle. I don't plan to buy a new vehicle, so I'm going to continue to pay birthday tax on that car. There's also this other, somebody mentioned it to me this morning, that there's this rumor floating around that you can opt in for $300. I'm not sure where that came from. Apparently, some example used somewhere that said for approximately $300, you may opt in. There's also some other qualifiers there, and we're going to talk about that as we move through the morning. There's tons of misconceptions out there. And part of your job and my job is to make sure people understand. None of us like change, unless it's change we initiate, right? You know, if something I want, it's great. But if it's something you want, I might necessarily not care for it. We're going to have a whole group of taxpayers that don't know about it and don't understand it. So that's part of our job, and part of what we're going to talk about today is what we can do to make sure that folks are getting the right story and that we're controlling the message so that we know what they're hearing is the right, rather than what somebody else thinks it says. Because I've had people write the department and say, I can't believe you're going to charge this fee on top of sales tax. Well, that's not right. We're not. So you have to go back and kind of start with the basics. And it's really not easy to explain to someone who doesn't have background. Most of us in this room have some background in this. So it's pretty easy for us to understand. But most of your customers coming into the tax office aren't going to have the background you and I have. So we have to be very careful that we give them the full story so they understand. But let's figure out what we're going to apply the